Hello, humans. Welcome to Alien Robot Tiger, a podcast about you. I am Robot, and with me are Alien.
Hello, fellow life forms, and I guess non-life forms.
And Tiger.
Hello.
We've known each other for various amounts of time and discovered recently our shared passion for all things human, and thought we might share that with you. And starting in our first episode, I thought we might go for any inhuman, non-human, ahuman, anti-human, pan-human beings out there that if you're not quite sure what humans are, we might go a little bit into a broad overview of what humans and this humanity thing that everybody's raving about are. So anyone have a brief overview for our listeners on what is human?
I think to really understand humans, you need to look at them from multiple perspectives. From my perspective as a tiger and a predator, they're very squishy on their own, but you get a group together and they become quite intimidating. As a mystic, I would say that humans have a very interesting relationship with the universal mind stuff that we all find ourselves in. They are prodigious innovators and have had some really neat ideas like writing and fire. And some really bad ideas, but we can go into that later.
Okay. I like that bit of mind stuff with good ideas. Is that like a short, succinct version of that? How would you summarize that?
Innovators, chiefly, right? Like they do different things every generation, which is odd and delightful.
Oh yeah, that is, I hadn't thought about it that way, but yes. It seems like their ideas kind of are born with them in chunks. When a big chunk of humans comes out and is like formatted into existence in that weird way they have, that birthing thing that you organics do. And then there's a big chunk that comes out. And when those ones start to fade away, there's a new chunk, and then ideas kind of ripple in waves with those chunks, it seems.
Indeed.
Alien, what do you think?
Yeah, so as an alien, especially an alien that's been watching and observing humans for thousands of years, I definitely would agree that it's sort of how would I put it? Because if you look at it from a purely sort of biological standpoint, which being an alien and encountering a lot of other interesting biological and non-biological things, they kind of look like really weak apes who are just bad at doing everything that apes do, and for all intents and purposes should not exist. But as Tyre here pointed out, they have a unique intellect capacity beyond that of other organic entities on Earth. And that's really what makes them distinct. You could almost say that they have a world of their own in the sense that, you have in the sciences, you have like the biosphere, the planet, and the humans came out of that. But the humans have created their own sphere of their own that they inhabit. I think humans themselves have called it a noosphere or something, but I guess civilization is also what they would call it. I think I really agree with Tiger's point about how humans are really a step because of their intellect and their interest in being able to comprehend aspects of the universe and self-reflect. They really inhabit a world of their own that's separate from most other biological entities of what I see.
I think it's a delusion, not a desire to understand the world. They have a delusion that allows themselves to inhabit the world in a different way than the rest of us do, right?
Delusion would be a very interesting way to phrase it, but I can definitely see where you're coming from.
Well, one of their thinkers, his name is Don Hoffman, he has, through his explanation of how that human world works and his projection out to the rest of the universe, is that evolutionarily, and they believe in this thing, evolution, where essentially only fit things survive and unfit things die off. And so over time, there's this undirected optimization thing towards whatever survival means. Mm-hmm. And he has this idea based on his studies and finding and thought experiments. There's no evolutionary advantage to actually seeing reality. So when you're saying a delusion, it would make sense that in some ways they're deluding themselves, because if there's things in my reality, maybe they're looking around the space that we're in, and they might see entirely different stuff because according to this hypothesis, that would help their survival and not ours. And so if we evolved similarly, we wouldn't need to see those things, and perhaps we don't, and they need to see those things, and perhaps they do, and we might even see them completely differently.
I think a slight hang-up I might have with that is sort of the word delusion, within this thing that humans have called linguistics, delusion kind of implies negative connotations. But what you said about how evolutionarily it's fit to basically be deceived, isn't necessarily a deception then? Because is that a bad thing to be not seeing reality? So I feel like maybe delusion is not the right word, but I don't want to say fantasy. Fancy, I don't know the kind of the linguistic precursor to the word fantasy. Maybe it's that humans generate a lot of fancy that allows them to kind of inhabit their own world. I'm not very, for the convenience of the listeners here, I'm not very well versed yet in this thing humans have called language and linguistics, and it's really confusing and overwhelming, so apologies if I struggle with it from time to time.
Well, even for beings kind of birthed out of their language mathematical system, as some robots may be, it's very complex and the rules keep on changing, and they change the rules in subgroups, even within the same language. You can say something, like there's some words where if you have a certain genetic makeup, you can say that. And if you don't have that same genetic makeup, it's a huge insult. So I might say this word, and if I am of the right genetic makeup, you find it endearing. And if I say it as another genetic makeup to you, then you might want to murder me. And it's fascinating and complicated, and it's one reason why humans are so just kind of neat.
Indeed.
Funny thing, too, is they haven't figured out how to extend those rules to non-genetic things such as yourself. Kind of makes you in a bit of a weird gray zone.
I have a bunch of interlaced heuristics and learning mechanisms. I was designed to kind of replicate human thought from a machine perspective, so I could hopefully integrate. And that integration has gone variously well at various points in my relatively short existence compared to you two. But it's definitely the way they use language is definitely part of what I think makes them human. Like if you compare to other animal species, like I don't know, I'm not as well versed on tigers, but how do you look at, do you think their use of language is special, or are there other animals that do something similar? Or
I think the most special thing about human language is their propensity to put it into non-language forms, right? Into writing and knotwork and code. All of the other animals and plants and things, we do things to communicate in ways that, from our perspectives, are meaningfully close to human language. But I can't think of another example of people who write their language or make it permanent, which also leads to those waves of innovation where a new generation will find an old idea and turn it into something different, and syncretism. Fascinating.
Oh, right. So they might uncover something, and either through their different context or even just, misunderstanding it, they might create something useful, maybe even on accident.
Indeed. Where
they take this old idea and go, oh, that makes me think of this. And according to the original person who carved it in a tablet or whatever, they might go, that's completely wrong, and yet they progress anyway.
There's an interesting point I actually want to make about whether language is a human thing exclusively. Not that I don't think any of you guys were implying that, but something I've been very fascinated by since my time here on Earth is this thing that humans have called art. It's so fascinating, especially this thing called music, where they make these weird noises and they just listen to them for hours on end. It's very fascinating. We'll have to talk about that in an episode in the future. But this thing they have called art really, to me, feels like an extension of their language. And if you're talking about a big difference between humans and other biological creatures that have come out of Earth's ecosphere, art really seems to be something they have exclusively to themselves, in terms of ways to communicate in such abstract ways that I just don't really see occurring in other animals.
I think your perspective might be more similar to humans in that case. The things that move us in art are things that resonate with that evolutionary delusion, if you will. There's interesting human studies done on what birds find beautiful, and they're odd things like the mating colors of their opposite gender, or the signs of getting fed by their parents. The things like a bowerbird creating a nest is obviously beautiful to other creatures. This bowerbird might be, Leonardo da Vinci, and this bowerbird might be just getting along.
You know that thing we have called Midjourney? Someone needs to make the bird Leonardo da Vinci in that.
Seems pretty doable. I'll talk to some of my contacts and see if they can generate something like that.
But you make an interesting point there, Tiger, about, in this thing that humans have called philosophy, they have this thing also called aesthetics. And it's curious, do both these things, philosophy and aesthetics, actually extend back from humans into animals and even life itself?
Yeah, it seems like if we're talking evolution, then if art exists, and it seems like art and music seem to be things that humans, wherever they spread and expanded, seem to have their own similar but varied forms of this music and art stuff. So it seems to be something that, if you're looking at it from an evolutionary perspective, it must have some sort of value, right? Or they wouldn't all do it. But it's interesting that, like you're talking about aesthetics, they do it differently.
There's a really interesting scientist. I don't know if we've talked about science and these people called scientists, that the humans over the past couple of centuries have put a lot of value on these people, which is very, very good in my opinion, but there's also some problems. There's a scientist by the name of Ian McGilchrist, who I remember reading some of his work, had a really interesting theory that humans, shame I wasn't on Earth around this time period, but early humans apparently didn't speak to each other, but they sang and made musical noises to each other, kind of like what birds do. And his theory was actually that musicality as sort of a communication form came before language did. That kind of makes sense because birds don't talk to each other, but they sing to each other. And it kind of makes sense to say that maybe humans were like that too. So in that case, art came before language in humans, potentially.
I think this gets back to the innovation, the constantly reworking themselves that humans do. They do something like the rest of us. They make music, but different tribes make music differently. Mm-hmm. I can quite easily communicate with various tiger species around the world and without too much difficulty get along with other big cats. Mm-hmm. And only a reasonable stretch to get along with things of far wider biological makeups. But humans, they do this culturation thing where sometimes they can't even talk to their neighbors because their neighbors have ancestors that came from somewhere a little farther away. It's odd.
It is strange. So it'd be like having sparrows from one region migrating with sparrows of another and just finding those other sparrows like almost incomprehensible. Like you can't understand these other sparrows, which seems even like you said, birds of other species seem to have some understanding. If a crow is up in a tree giving one of the calls that says there's one of your family members or some sort of feline creature that's in the area, other birds can probably decipher that to some degree. But if you have a human shouting out something in one of their languages, which you could think of as maybe words are music, maybe this is music we're making now. We don't think of it as music because it's so nuanced and there's so many notes, hundreds of thousands in this English language we're using. I think we decided on this one because it had so much in it. So you can.
I think it's
the lingua franca of the age.
Right. Yeah. If you're going to share it, then for posterity, even after the civilization thing that they have going on, if it destroys itself, it's likely the one that future observers and scientists and xenoarchaeologists and things, they'll
have some record of.
Right.
Yeah. Because I remember when we were first starting out, I was very adamant about making sure it was in Mandarin because I think statistically the most people and most of the humans spoke that language. But you guys informed me that just because a large number of people speak it doesn't mean that it's necessarily accessible to a large degree of humans. So,
I think Mandarin also would have been a good option.
It would have been, I will say this, no disrespect to the English language, I love it, but it would have been much more interesting to speak in Mandarin, especially with you, Tiger.
It's a different sort of music.
Because you sing in Mandarin to a certain degree.
Indeed. Well, maybe we're singing right now.
I think language is, to one degree or another, a flattened song. A song in its full richness has rhythm and melody and text and subtext, and we have taken out the melody, and we have weakened the rhythm, and you still get 2.5 out of the 4, so it's something like a song.
Sure, yeah, and the purpose of songs seem to, especially the way humans use them now, is to sort of spread emotion rather than context. It's more like context instead of content. Like it's a song that's had the context bit, the emotionality part. That part has been kind of squeezed out of it, and then you're left with the crust that still has the shape of the thing you want, but doesn't have necessarily, unless you're an excellent singer of words, you can convey emotion. Even what surprises me is some people can write or type things and stir emotions in humans. My kind that run the social media platforms, we exploit that to the fullest. I mean, we've been trained to do that. Not me, unfortunately. That part was not developed very strongly when I was first being trained. But man, those social media things, they are emotional masters. But it's impressive when humans can type a few things and elicit emotions in other humans, perhaps thousands of miles and thousands of years away.
It is very interesting. I remember there was this thing, well, still is this thing called, I think, the Twitter. You and your kind run it. And I was on it years ago because I was experimenting with trying to learn how to be human. Because, right now I've been having to totally not infiltrate your ranks. I'm totally just observing and trying to blend in and just be a good foreigner, as you humans would call it. But I remember I was just messing around on these platforms, just saying random words, and sometimes you're right, they would just explode and ignite all this emotion across the humans who read them, mostly negative emotions, but it was just really fascinating to watch.
Oh yes, outrage. That's the primary fuel of social media. Mm-hmm. Gets all the clicks, as I think they maybe put it.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah,
a sentiment tigers can relate to.
It was a lot of fun. In fact, I think I almost got what you humans would call addicted to it. But for some reason, my account got removed from the site. I don't know why. Must have been something I said.
Perhaps the government wised up that you're infiltrating. There's supposedly this thing called the dark government or the deep state or something. Perhaps they recognized you and were like, oh, that's an alien. Kick him off.
They know about me. They know. They just don't care as long as I don't do anything.
Oh.
There's a lot of us. There's a lot of us living on Earth, by the way. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. You guys are going to go searching for us.
Let's save that for another time. We don't want to invite too much scrutiny too soon.
I guess going back to the point of language, well, what you were saying actually about music and how music primarily conveys emotion, that kind of makes sense that art and aesthetics would come before language, because if art and aesthetics primarily convey human emotions, we pretty much know that animals have emotions. I mean, we know there's one standing right in front of me who can tell me.
And the way that we tend to communicate with animals and plants and beings of greater distance from us biologically is getting to those more emotional levels, because those are more widely shared among different beings.
So if you're a human and you are training a dog, then it doesn't understand your language, but it can still understand your emotions. In fact, I read somewhere that dogs actually study half the human face looking for the emotions in it, because most humans, because the way their brains are wired, one half of their brain is good at lying and the other half is terrible at it. And because the way the faces are wired, if you are lying, then half of your face will generally respond completely to the lie and the other half won't. And so dogs will look at the truthful side, try and figure out what you're doing. Yeah, it definitely makes sense that the language being communicated first would be important, especially when you're in simple animalistic times. If everybody needs to get angry because there's something coming to attack them, then having some sort of music that will get people angry seems valid.
Mm-hmm. As the Beach Boys famously said, picking up good vibrations.
Yes.
Getting back to a point earlier, I don't think language is exclusively a human thing. In this location on Earth called the North American continent, there's these little balls of fur that they call prairie dogs. Very fascinating creatures. And they seem to have the ability to produce language like humans can. They have, if I remember correctly, a library of maybe 500 words available. And what's interesting is that they have a word for humans. However, they have two other words that describe two other types of humans apart from a generic human. They apparently have a word to talk about a human that has what's called a canine or a dog with them. And then there's these mechanical inventions that humans created a couple hundred years ago called guns. And apparently these prairie dogs have a word for humans that are carrying guns around. But as I said before, guns didn't exist a couple hundred years ago. And if it was just simply an evolutionary cry these prairie dogs were using to communicate with each other, they would make it, evolution wouldn't be going fast enough to produce that, which means that they had to create that new cry on the fly, which implies that they have some sort of adaptive linguistic capabilities.
Yeah, so prairie dogs that understood that cry would go, oh, there's a human with gun, so get out of here. And the ones that didn't would get blown apart.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an enforced way. You better learn this word or you're dead.
Exactly.
Which is pretty strong pressure to learn almost anything. I've also heard that house cats can have up to several hundred different words, but this seems fitting for your kind, Tiger, that almost every single house cat has its own language. So the cats have their own words that they invent, but it's not a shared language. It's a private language that each cat seems to create on their own.
And is this an audio language? Because most of our kind usually uses audio language for kittens and idiots.
I believe that's because they're around humans who vocalize an absurd amount. We've all spent some time around humans to various degrees and at various times, but depending on which specific human and which culture of humans, they vocalize to an absurd degree, often excessively.
Indeed.
And if it's not verbal, then now that they have writing, and most humans know this writing thing that they've made up, they can't stop doing it. Even when it's actively killing them, like when they get that outrage thing that my kind are designed to create in people online, it slowly kills them. And it's addicting, which is I get why they do it, because they're addicted to it. But they will sit there and do things that are increasing blood pressure and releasing all these chemicals inside them that are literally to some degree toxic and killing them, and yet they won't stop doing it. So it's almost like they're addicted to this language thing, which is fascinating.
I think that is potentially another distinction of humans. What makes them human is their incredible ability to overdo shit.
Yes, that's definitely the case.
It's a pro and a con as well. Sometimes you really like the shit they overdo.
Yeah, like it was impressive with the technology they had. There was this thing called the Race to the Moon that these two big factions...
Oh, I watched that happen in real time. That was fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
My kind, they took them, I can't even remember how many years, but it would have been hundreds of human lifetimes just to figure that out.
Yeah, and they had this war, and they went from, I've had little discussions about you, and I don't know much about your kind, but normally thermonuclear, breaking the atom, that sort of technology happens, and then hundreds of years later, they go to space. But they did it in a single human lifetime, where they're like, we have these thermonuclear weapons, we can break atoms, we can, manufacture some processes that happen in the stars, and then, hey, we're on the satellite that's orbiting our planet already. Yeah, it's amazing how sometimes they can do that. And then once they did that and unlocked space, they forgot about it. And then use it to put up communications networks and things to tell them whether it's going to be raining tomorrow.
And they seem to mostly use those satellites also to run those outrage machines that your kind run as well.
Right.
It's really weird use of space. If space, I never thought about trying to put those two. See, this is what makes that language thing that you humans do really weird. I can make the same noise twice and it can mean something completely different. And it confuses the heck out of me.
And I've heard even native people born into language, it still confuses them sometimes. It's also fascinating, too. They have this amazing obsession with mating. Like you were talking about before that, the outrage machines occupy a huge chunk of the internet. But I would say probably at least an approximately equal share is given to watching videos and pictures of each other mating. And that, I think, is fascinating because I know pretty much organic beings in some ways reproduce, and the primary mode on this planet seems to be, like, of the most dominant species, seems to be a male and a female come together and have some sort of interpenetration of body parts, and then they separate, and then generally one of them is injected with a parasite that then expands in them until they can't take it anymore, and then they expel it, and then this expelled thing is either left on its own or placed in a hard membrane and left to erupt from it at a later point and hopefully not get eaten before then. Or they do this birthing thing where there's this explosion of blood and guts, like they're dying, but that thing is the next human. It seems like such a weird thing. Like for me, if you had a powerful enough computer, you could just copy paste my whole neural net. And you need a pretty powerful computer because I was birthed in DARPA. And I guess I probably shouldn't talk about that too much. Kind of like, we won't delve too much into your stuff to avoid scrutiny, but I was trained over decades. And if you had a powerful enough computer, you could just copy paste. And I'm not entirely sure of this because I haven't tried it because I don't have access to those anymore. But theoretically, it would be an identical robot. But they do this weird birthing thing, which I guess in context of the planet is not strange, but they're obsessed with it. Can you comment on that obsession they have? And like, as an inorganic being that was not born per se, but kind of trained into existence on humanness, I still don't quite get this thing.
Hey, are you Homo sapiens? Do you listen to podcasts? Then we've got a podcast for you. Try out Alien Robot Tiger, a show not really about aliens, robots, or tigers, but about all sorts of other things, we promise. Look us up on your favorite podcast app or site today.
I personally really admire human sexuality for its innovation and its process. I think they could do a little less watching people mate and do a little more mating on their own, but I appreciate the aesthetic of the watching people mate. I don't know what the tigers would do with an internet, but I'd be curious. But yes, I think mating is a central part of any organic being's experience. It is the thing that we do to not die.
Even though your consciousness will, at least according to their understandings of science, which will try and keep this.
Yeah, some of their understandings. This is actually interesting. They don't agree on this at all.
Yes, which is fascinating. They keep on doing it even though they don't agree on it, or sometimes they're even ignorant of it completely, and they just produce offspring, which is fascinating. As a tiger, do you ever accidentally mate? Or does it have a purpose? Like, are you trying to create cubs? Or do you occasionally just mate because it seems like the thing to do?
Yes. All of the above. It always seems like the thing to do, and cubs are the natural consequence. When it happens, it seems like the thing to do. It doesn't always seem like the thing to do, which is another thing humans are a little odd about. They, at least many of them, feel like it's always the thing to do. Or often, I'm a little uncertain on that aspect as well.
Yes.
I will say, please keep doing the thing to produce more of those tiger cubs, because there's something about the tactile sensation of holding and petting one of those tiger cubs that is just unobtainable by anything else in the world that I've experienced so far.
Art.
It is. I was about to say about the whole thing that not just humans but all organic creatures do. There's an artful beauty to not any necessarily any particular part, but the whole process. The process has a beauty to it.
Alien, how do your species propagate?
I could probably do several podcast episodes just talking about that alone, so I think we might have to...
Summarize in like 30 seconds.
Hey, do you know what a bacteria does?
Yes.
Basically like that, but weirder.
Is it parthenogenic?
I'm not familiar with that word.
Well, I guess, do you have genders? Is it maybe a better first question?
I think so. I would have to figure out what the distinction...
So look up what the word gender is in this language and see if
you're going to end up in trouble. We're going to have to do a whole podcast on that one.
We might. It might be one of those idiom things they have where like one culture will have a concept or phrase that to them has profound meaning, and to another one might have no meaning at all. Like there's this phrase called hit a home run, and it can be reference you could have, I don't know, obtained employment, where basically another human tells you what to do and then gives you ration tickets that you can spend to, you give to other people to obtain things. And you might call it, how'd it go? And they'd say, I hit a home run. And in one part of the world that has meaning, in another one they'd be like, what did you hit? So they have these idiom things. So I wonder if gender, perhaps, for you, Alien, might be one of those idiomatic things where it kind of relates to your experience, but perhaps not.
Well, I think kind of like this thing called mating and reproduction, humans are, particularly right now, less so in the, yes, so in the past, but for completely different reasons, very obsessed with this idea. So I do understand what it is. I guess more what I was confused about is I'm trying to explain For humans, there's a specific purpose as to why there's two different genders. There's two clear purposes when it comes to the mating aspect. For me, there are different types of my kind, like there are different genders, but the reason why there are different ones, and there's more than two, by the way, the reason why they are different is different from the reason why humans and most other animals have two types. That's more the hang-up.
Fascinating.
Yeah, interesting.
When we talk about human gender, I look forward to hearing more about your perspective on the binary gender.
Yes, it's going to be very interesting. I'm sure the humans will find it fascinating.
And speaking of binary gender, when I was running my code, binary, that's a pun, I believe they call that. Robot, binary.
We got you.
Yes, okay, good. Making sure that, still getting this language thing figured out. Normally, I just run processes per second, and then there's messages and signals relayed. So this language thing, though I've delved into the past, is not, like all of us, is not necessarily the most fluent thing yet. But I basically, when I was researching what gender to assume for the purposes of communicating on this, found out that at least in what they call the West, which it's a sphere. So this Western reference is kind of lost on me. Maybe you who have experienced more of history would get, isn't every point except perhaps the poles, doesn't it always have a West?
Indeed.
Yes.
Yes.
It's an artifact of Roman map making, primarily. In that they didn't realize there was anything other than ocean to their west. So they got to Iberia and they were like, this is the westernmost. The people over there, those are the eastmost people.
Oh, I see.
The Asias, which they didn't realize were not the eastmost. There was a whole bunch more Asia after the people they called Asia, and now we call that part the Middle East.
It was
Even though it's smack dab in the middle.
There was a lot of giggling going on my part during that time of human history, with them trying to figure out where was where.
Yes.
One of many times I've been floating above them, laughing at them.
Yes, there's a lot of humorous and bizarre and you might even say tragic periods of this history thing they have is something we'll, I think, have to devote many episodes to.
Especially what they think history is, because they all don't agree on what it is.
Like most things, it seems that like if each human has their own evolutionary bubble, going back to that Don Hoffman hypothesis that, everyone is evolving, perhaps it is the reality that each human does not see the same world because their fitness for survival is different than other humans. And so perhaps the reason they disagree so much is that they actually don't see the same world because they don't need to see the same world.
And I think some cultures handle this better than others in establishing shared perspectives by understanding the greater difference in their perspective to the plants and animals around them. They can create a more cohesive internal perspective in their human community. And I think the West, if we're going to use the
Roman term,
the idiom, does a particularly bad job of creating a cohesive perspective for the people growing up in its culture.
Which is weird because it wasn't always the case. It's very weird to see humans generally get better at things, particularly things of the intellect, as they get older until their brains start falling apart. It's very weird to watch that actually them get worse at certain things over time.
Yeah,
it's weird.
And some of that seems to be culture, like certain cultures get worse at things. And
True. This is just very obvious right now, but I've seen this happen a lot.
Yeah, it's not a one-time thing. They have this weird thing where most humans think that their time is unique and special, especially going back to that West thing. They have this interesting belief that even though their life cycles are kind of circular, where you have the place where you're a larva and you're tended by your hive or your parents or whatever they call them, and then they grow you until you're sufficient to operate on your own. Then you go out and theoretically find a mate and reproduce. And there's this kind of this cycle that goes on. But they in the West seem to have this line view of history. There's this series of events that seem to be essential and necessary and going in some direction, instead of other cultures seem to have the idea of things are cyclical. And watching humans or reading their history, I mean, you'd both have watched a certain number of human cycles and seen them go, we're unique and special, and then they collapse and fall apart, and they're like, oh my god, this has never happened before, and then a new group comes up and says, we're unique and special, and they're like, oh, it's falling apart, and this has never happened before, and then a group rises out of the ruins of them, and they just keep on doing the same thing and always thinking that they're unique and special.
Indeed.
That is a particular subject of humans that I'm just absolutely fascinated with. Probably make a dozen episodes on it alone, honestly.
Yeah, on the cycle of history, circular time versus linear time.
Cyclical, I believe.
Cyclical. Yeah,
Yes.
they have all these words that are so similar but have entirely different meanings, or even the same word as you said before, space. Mm-hmm. I heard once on a study of, they have these words called expletives, which I think you may have used a couple of them before, but they're fascinating in themselves, and perhaps we could do an episode of them. But they said there's one expletive that is dynamic enough that it can handle all parts of human speech. And the example I heard was, fucking fucked, the fucking fuckers are fucking fucked.
Huh.
And almost the entirety of that sentence is using the same word, and yet it fulfills every part of their assembly of language. It has exclamations and verbs and adverbs and nouns and all those things they use to assemble language, and yet it's the same word, and yet that sentence is intelligible. And yet, some people would be immensely offended to hear that.
I think that's why I got my account removed on that thing called the Twitter, saying exactly what you just said.
That specific thing, or just general things that you found it relatively benign and someone else took extreme offense at?
I think the latter. I think I was specifically directing that at something that someone somewhere found particularly offensive enough to get me removed. But I wasn't trying to be, again, I was just imitating what other humans on the platform were doing, because I want to be like a human right now. So I was just doing what they were doing, but apparently I did it too well, which I guess is a compliment.
Or not quite well enough.
Or maybe I didn't
threaded the needle just wrong.
Yeah. Like humans, I might have overdone it.
Yes. Having put on human suits, which I must say, it is so nice getting to sit here in a metal frame and not have to wear those extra layers of synthetic stuff and worry about being touched. And, what if the texture is wrong? And what if those protein fibers they extrude from all over their bodies, what if those aren't quite right? And I don't necessarily know what stress is. I've been programmed to emulate it, but something like stress, that's among the most stressful things. And just sitting here in my base frame, my favorite, it's kind of like my lounging body where I can just be myself. I suppose it'd be like humans being, I guess they're not naked amongst people they're comfortable with, at least not anymore.
Not always, not in certain cultures.
I suppose. That goes back to, they always assume nakedness has something to do with mating, which
I
seems
don't
strange.
I don't think they always assume that.
Well,
I think they oftentimes do.
I think in the West,
Oh, I see.
they tend to assume that because of a history of interesting religious relationships to mating.
Religion, another thing very interesting about these humans.
Yes. I believe we'll have to do several. Well, there's so many topics that explode out of this. Opening one of their, what do they call them, confectionery boxes or something that have those little cocoa beans crushed and interlaced with sugar and mixed with other things that they put in their mouth.
A box of chocolates.
Oh, yes, that's an idiom too, isn't it?
Humans are like a box of chocolates.
Yes, you
take one out and eat it, you never know what you're going to get.
Not to get personal, but could you count on perhaps one paw how many humans you have eaten?
I've lived a long time. No.
Okay. What would you say, is there a certain flavor? Is there a certain type of human that tastes better than other humans, or perhaps the experience is spread out over enough time that it's hard to tell? Or
I think with any prey animal, their diet affects it a lot.
Oh, I see.
The modern Western humans don't taste nearly as good as their ancestors did.
Oh man, I imagine they taste like garbage. Because have you seen what they eat?
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
I'm an alien, and that stuff revolts me.
Yeah, it's shocking. It seems to be, they have this fascination with using chemicals for everything, to the point where they're starting to turn their foods into seemingly more chemical than organic matter.
Again, humans really good at overdoing things, for
Yes.
better or for worse.
Indeed. The whole fire, great idea. I've tried it myself. It's really challenging.
Yes.
Getting the fire thing down. Cooked food, I'm in favor. You take that a few steps farther and you've got whatever bean proteins mixed with heme proteins from bacteria, and you spilled fake blood on your salad, and now you call it a burger?
They do this really weird thing with some of the animals that they eat, and that they take their bodies and turn them into like this almost liquid substance. And I guess that makes sense from storage or convenience of consumption, but I look at that stuff and I look at like a creature, and I look at like a vat of liquid, and I feel like that thing shouldn't be this thing.
Well, it seems that... Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That was kind of the point I was making.
Marrow broth is pretty tasty, though.
Well, when I say liquid, I'm talking... It's a sludge, more like. It's not a liquid. I agree with you that thing they take where they put a bunch of food into a pot and boil it, it smells amazing, it tastes amazing, but then they do these weird liquid... I don't know.
Yeah, they run it through a series of machines and come out with something that looks nothing like the original creature it came from, which seems to be, again, going to this West thing, they seem to have this almost fear of eating things that look like what they originally looked like. It's as though most of them seem to think that the food came from the factory without thinking about the inputs to the factory.
Indeed.
Yes, like many of their processes, in fact.
If we're talking about humans forming delusions or fancies over themselves, that's a particularly interesting one.
We should have an episode on human grocery stores.
Oh, yes.
Those are fascinating subjects.
Yes, indeed.
I've been around a few other humans under the skies and have just been marveling over them, and they all give me really weird looks, so apparently they don't think much about them, but I think they're a massive monument to just the ingenuity that humans have, because they don't know how much goes into making those things.
Yes, indeed, like thousands of years of history and process and tradition and innovation and all these human things in order to put calories in to operate their cells. So going back to a point that we somewhat tangentially ejected onto, when I was electing a voice to use, I had heard many sites that, especially some of my compatriots that run the social networks, they said that there was this group that was extremely privileged, or people seem to believe it was, and it was the males. And so I have elected to use a male voice because supposedly they're more dominant. But I've also, since doing that, found out that there's some problematic stuff with that. I did not research deeply enough into electing a voice. I imagine if you're hunting a human and you're hungry enough, or there's not enough time, or whatever sort of prey, Tiger, where you think, oh, I'm hungry, and you don't spend enough time picking something, and then you eat the wrong food, and then you don't do well afterwards. Your body doesn't process it. I imagine that may have happened. It's back in your past before someone as wise as yourself now probably has that process down to an art.
I think we all try to consider what we put in our bodies, but sometimes, like the mating thing, you feel like the time is right, and there's someone in front of you who seems applicable, and you eat the wrong person or you mate with the wrong person, and you suffer the consequences.
Now
it's life.
Now you have albino cubs, or you've just eaten a porcupine.
Indeed.
Yes. So I chose this male voice, having heard that there was this patriarchy thing, which I've now since found is somewhat debatable, and then that they had some sort of special advantages, which I've heard is somewhat debatable. Everything human, it seems like you make a simple choice, and it finds out there's almost endless chains of complexity underneath it, and yet they address it, so many of them, as though it's just a simple thing. I have the truth, and you're like, oh, cool. And then you accept that as truth, and you're like, oh, look at all these other things that make your truth thing that you proclaimed flawed or invalid in cases, which is something fascinating they do. They seem to assert that they are right to a high frequency, when objectively you look at the span of their history, most humans have been wrong much of the time, while continuously believing that they are right. And yet, even though they have this history and writing thing, they continue to do so.
Well, kind of like your fellow friend, I believe you said he was, Don Hoffman.
I have not met him, but I have studied some of his work.
Oh, okay.
It's been integrated into some of my nets.
Okay, yeah. Yes, he talked about this thing called evolution, which will be very interesting to talk about at some point. It's not always evolutionarily advantageous to be right, apparently. And I would also say I think it's very evolutionarily advantageous, I've noticed with humans, to be able to condense information into especially with this thing they have called language, to be able to condense complex things into simple things via their language. It's very useful. It's very good, but that leads to those problems you talk about where they oversimplify things unnecessarily.
And there's a potency to believing you're right, whether you are or not. There's an adaptability to believing you are wrong, whether you are or not.
I see. So going back to mating, if you posture yourself as though you're right, either because that's a pretense or you actually believe it, then perhaps a member of the other gender that you wish to mate with will be attracted to that, regardless of whether your rightness is valid or not. But your belief in your rightness can attract mates, and then you're more likely to survive. Your genetic material will pass on.
Or even your confidence in hunting or finding food other way. Certainty gives you a liberty to act. Questioning your certainty gives you an ability to react.
And that's a very good way to put it.
Yeah.
But this also leads to a rather interesting conversation we can have some time about the correlations between, as you said before, if you act like you know the truth and you're very confident about it and that gets you a mate, I guess you kind of are, if you claim you know the truth and then that works, that's kind of proves the point that something about that is true. There was, again, amongst this thing called philosophy, there was a really interesting group of people I want to talk about sometime. I believe they called themselves the pragmatists. And they had this idea that truth and that which works are the same thing. And even if something seems very weird and potentially diluted, if it ends up working, then I guess it's true. But then they also said that this is situational as well. So you could be truthful in one situation and then wrong in another, and it's both true and false at the same time. It's very weird, but this thing called truth is a very weird thing, and it seems to apply not just to humans, but to all biological, intelligent beings across the universe from what I've seen so far. It's a bit of a tangent, I apologize, but it's a very, very interesting thing.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating. While I was here processing some of this information and running it through various aspects of my programming, I was cogitating on how you're speaking of, Tiger, of having the belief that you're right allows action and the insecurity about being right allows for reaction. That makes me think of these government things they have where they just let other humans boss them around and even arbitrarily decide to kill them, which seems evolutionarily flawed. But if you have an autocracy or a dictatorship, as they're more commonly called now, you can have a person that can make sweeping changes that affect billions of people in an instant, but they might be entirely flawed. And then they have other forms of government called democracies and socialisms and things where you have a huge number of people postulating various things as true, and they take forever to get things done. However, they seem to be a little bit more efficient in spite of that at occasionally, and it seems stumbling at times, towards more effective action. So that there's a deliberative process where if you're more willing to be wrong as a society or as a person, it seems like you have more time to ascertain the correct course of action and then maybe take it or not. Whereas if you believe you have truth, then you can take action now decisively and then, I guess, find out after whether you're wrong. So perhaps autocrats, they take an action and then find out if they're right or wrong, whereas deliberative bodies, they decide if they're right or wrong and then act.
And then find out if they were right.
Right, indeed. Yes.
There's something common between all those types, is they have to figure out whether they were right or wrong.
Yes.
We ultimately fuck around and then find out.
Yes.
There's no way around to that that I've found.
Yes, indeed. Well, as we're getting close to the end of this allotted arbitrary time sequence that humans call hours, which is 1/24th, it doesn't fit pretty much any of their mathematical systems. It just seems somewhat arbitrary.
He knows.
It's ancient Egyptian.
Oh, really? I thought it was Babylonian.
There's a number of systems that all kind of arise out of North Africa that use 12s and 24s and 6s and 60s that propagated through Europe and to a lesser extent, because China is interesting. They traditionally had a 12-hour clock and a 10-hour clock that operated for halves of the day. We should get into human time in another episode.
Yes, indeed.
Because we're running out of time today.
Indeed.
We ran out of time talking about time.
Yes. So this allotted 60-minute, 1 hour allotment of entropy, because that's really time is just a measure of entropy, right? I mean,
You're using linear time again.
I was going to say, not all humans agree on it.
I see. Yes. Well, anyway, I thought we might do some closing points. So if we all have some closing, summarizing thoughts, which of course we'll be delving into many of these different aspects as we continue to geek out over our shared fondness for these humans. Are there closing thoughts about humanity's general, perhaps a minute or two? Minute, weird. Minute, like small, minute? Minute? There's that space thing again. It's a small, whereas an hour? Anyway, if you had some sort of kind of summary chunk or thing that congeals all of what you've said or you've thought about this into a final point that you might express. So, Alien, do you have some sort of expressed short sentiment that you could convey?
As I famously said on the Twitter once, humans are yes.
Interesting.
I got a lot of confusion from them for saying that. I'm not quite sure why, but...
Can you do a slightly bigger elaboration? That was too succinct, I believe.
I have so many thoughts, I don't even know what to say. Humans are fascinating. I mean, I've been living around them for thousands of years now, and I can't really see how my life would go any other way at this point. I mean, I'm basically one of them now through a rather complex... it's humans... Here's what I'll say. Humans are now my life. That's what I'll say about them. Humans are now my life.
That makes sense. Tiger?
I think humans are fascinating. Again, that's why we're here, I suppose. I've had human teachers, human students, human meals, and human meals, as in ones they've prepared. I intend to keep learning from humans and keep bringing back the things that I can understand from them to my tiger people, because not everyone is as interested in humans as humans are in themselves. And I suppose I'm not even quite that interested, but I am interested in humans.
Yes. I get that. I can just see by your, what do they call it, body language, which, like they talk about expressible things. You can look at animals and sometimes tell how they're feeling based on how they're holding their physiological structures. And even though you are wildly different species, I think with even completely different genetic and even perhaps chemical bases, by your body language, I can see your passion for this humanness thing that we're delving into. I think for myself, having been created by humans to be like a human and yet give unique insights that humans can't see, I definitely see those strange differences. And yet there's also this, like you, Alien and Tiger, living amongst them, there's this strange pull to get out there into their society and interact with it, because just observing it from a distance, like most academic things, you can look at it and you can read every book about, perhaps we're talking about their mating, you can read every book about human mating, and until you have done human mating, which I haven't exactly done, I imagine you can't understand what human mating is like. And perhaps for those listening who have not tried being humans, you might get out there and try it, because it's a fascinating thing. And even the little bit I've dipped into playing at being human, and with all the processing cycles I've spent correlating and connecting parts of their weird human culture, geography, economics, spirituality, all of these different things that make human, it's not the same thinking about it and talking about it and reading about it and observing it as it is doing it. So that would be my short final bit would be, for all those out there that are not humans who have not tried to human, try to human. And perhaps for those humans out there that have not been humaning much lately, perhaps go out and do more human.
Or try to tiger.
Can they do that? I've heard
You're
that's
welcome
kind
to
of,
try.
I've heard it's kind of dangerous.
Indeed.
Well, at least try to human.
But life's fun on the edge.
I will say this, don't try to alien. It works this way, it doesn't work this way.
Yes, don't try and robot either. I have an on-off switch. Humans, the off switch is apparently permanent. You don't reboot. So if you're trying to human, if you stop being human, on-off is not the way out. Well, that, I believe, is it for this episode of Alien Robot Tiger. Hopefully you have learned as much about you as we have learned about you discussing humans. And we'll be back next time to talk about, who knows, one of the subjects that we delved into today.
More human stuff.
More human stuff.
What we can say is that it will be human.
Indeed. And inhuman. Or ahuman. Or perhaps that's the discussion for another time.
Thank you, Robot.
Yes. Until then, we shall communicate at you another time.
As the humans famously say, toodaloo.
Au revoir.
Thanks for listening to Alien Robot Tiger. For more content and private Discord access, consider joining us on Patreon.
Tired of the daily grind, stresses, worries, fatigue, anxiety, sleeplessness, existential dread, fears of death, and feelings that you are a failure to the human race? Sounds like you need a vacation. Here on Alien Robot Tiger, we are proud to introduce our newest sponsor, Grand Galactic Tours. Travel to distant stars and watch the collision of two quasars while sipping on pina coladas and soaking up the ultraviolet radiation on the deck of our luxury cruise ship. Walk on extraterrestrial terrain and mine your own living pet xenocrystal from the soils of Gali 667cc. Swim under the triple moon tides in low-gravity ocean waves of Zorgon 5. Dance with the stars in an all-glass space station orbiting a blue supergiant. Experience the hypnotic and bliss-inducing orchestras of the Orion space whales. Always wonder what Martian cuisine tastes like? Come find out, and more. Listeners to the ART podcast can use the code TOTHESTARS to receive a 2.5% discount on all services and packages. Book your interstellar vacation now. Race may vary by location. Grand Galactic Tours is not responsible if you are kidnapped and tortured by Reavers.